The popcorn went cold in my hand, the butter a greasy film against my skin. Half an hour past the movie's start time. The silence in the living room was starting to grate. Sarah, usually a stickler for our Wednesday movie nights, was nowhere to be seen. Just when I was about to switch the TV off, the doorbell screamed through the house. I bolted up, heart hammering against my ribs. Relief washed over me as I flung the door open. Relief that quickly turned to a cold knot in my stomach. Sarah stood there, swaying slightly, a stranger in our doorway. Her eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, were glassy and distant. A cloying perfume, sweet and unfamiliar, hung thick in the air. She giggled, a sound light and bubbly, completely unlike her usual laugh. "Hey you," she slurred, her words thick on her tongue. "Movie night, right?" The knot in my stomach tightened. "Sarah, where?" My voice trailed off, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Girls' night gone wild," she declared, the giggle morphing into a loud, unfamiliar cackle that sent shivers down my spine. We painted the town red." Another wave of that unnerving perfume hit me, a stark contrast to her usual lavender scent. This wasn't Sarah, this wasn't the woman I knew. Fear, sharp and icy, wormed its way through me. "Who were you with?" I forced the words out, my voice low and dangerous. Her smile faltered for a second, replaced by a fleeting flicker of something. Fear? Confusion. It was gone as fast as it came. "Doesn't matter," she slurred, pushing past me and into the living room. The movie played on, the soundtrack a muffled backdrop to the turmoil within me. Sarah sank onto the couch, her laughter bubbling up again, a constant undercurrent to the tense silence that had settled between us. Who was she with? Where had she been? What had happened? The questions swirled in my head, unanswered and terrifying. I stole a glance at her, but her face was a mask, her glassy eyes staring blankly at the screen. This wasn't just a girl's night gone wild. Something was terribly wrong. My stomach lurched as I fumbled with Sarah's blouse, helping her dress for work. A flash of crimson caught my eye, a lipstick stain, bright red and brazen, nestled against the white collar. It wasn't the soft pink she usually wore, and it wasn't there yesterday. "Whoa there," I said, holding the blouse away from her. "What's this?" Sarah stiffened, her eyes flitting nervously to the mirror. "Oh, that must have gotten on when I hugged Linda goodbye this morning." Spilled her new lipstick, the klutz. Her explanation felt hollow. Linda, her ever-practical coworker, wouldn't be caught dead with lipstick that bold. But I swallowed the doubt, forcing a smile. "All right, just be careful next time." That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, cracks started appearing in our once solid routine. Late-night texts became a nightly ritual. The phone screen quickly turned down whenever I walked by. Work meetings stretched into late dinners, her explanations vague and hurried. Then came the receipt, crumpled and half hidden in the bottom of her purse. It screamed accusations. A fancy restaurant on the other side of town, a place we haven't been to in years. Not since our anniversary before the kids came along. My blood ran cold. "What's this?" I asked, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. "Oh, that," she mumbled, snatching the receipt and shoving it into her pocket. "Just a client meeting that turned into drinks. Work stuff, honey, you wouldn't understand." Her voice held a new edge, defensive and sharp. But the lie was clear in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't place. The flimsy explanation did nothing to quell the growing suspicion gnawing at me. Things had changed. Sarah's once carefree mornings now involved meticulous makeup routines, a stark contrast to her usual throw on some mascara and go approach. A new perfume clung to her, a sweet, floral scent that made my stomach churn. It wasn't the familiar lavender that had become synonymous with her. Every detail, every change, fueled the flames of doubt. Sarah, the woman I loved, the woman I shared my life with, was slipping away. But where was she going, and who was she going with? Guilt gnawed at me like a persistent rat. Downloading the phone tracker app felt like a betrayal, a desperate act fueled by a suspicion I couldn't shake. But the unease had become a constant companion, a dark cloud hanging over everything. The app confirmed my worst fears. Friday night, her phone pinged at a bar on Elm Street, the Alibi, a place notorious for its after-work hookups. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo in the quiet of the house. Saturday morning, I woke up with a hollow feeling in my gut. Sarah was still asleep, her face peaceful, the image a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I grabbed my phone, pretending a work call, and snuck out the door. The Alibi was buzzing when I walked in, a cacophony of chatter and laughter. My eyes scanned the crowded room, searching for the flash of blonde hair that would shatter the fragile hope clinging to me. There she was, at a corner booth, laughing with a group of men. None of them looked familiar. Fury, hot and raw, surged through me. I wanted to storm over there, confront her, demand answers. But something held me back. Maybe it was the fear in her eyes when I'd caught her with the lipstick stain, a fleeting fear I couldn't explain. Instead, I melted back into the crowd, unseen, unheard. The image of Sarah, her face lit up with amusement for someone other than me, burned into my memory. The laughter that had once filled our home now echoed in my head, a cruel reminder of the life slipping through my fingers. As I walked away, the question loomed large. Who was this woman I was married to, and what secrets was she hiding? The front door slammed shut behind me, the noise echoing through the empty house like a gunshot. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The image of Sarah, laughing with another man, was branded into my brain, a vivid reminder of the betrayal. I stormed into the living room, the crumpled receipt clutched tightly in my hand. Sarah was there, perched on the couch, a book in her lap, a picture of domestic bliss shattered by my arrival. Don't even pretend, I spat out, the words tumbling over each other. The bar, Friday night, care to explain? The book clattered to the floor as the color drained from her face. For a horrifying moment, she looked like a stranger, a ghost of the woman I knew. What are you talking about? Her voice was shaky, but her eyes held a flicker of defiance. Don't play dumb, Sarah, I growled, shoving the crumpled receipt in her face. This receipt, the Alibi, you were there, weren't you? The defiance crumbled, replaced by a wave of shame. She sank back onto the couch, tears welling up in her eyes. The truth tumbled out in a torrent of words, a tangled mess of emotional neglect and a desperate longing for excitement. Years of unspoken resentment surfaced, years of frustrations that had festered beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. Each accusation felt like a blow, each defense a flimsy shield against the storm of anger and hurt. The night devolved into a shouting match, our voices rising and falling in a chaotic symphony of pain. Words that had been unspoken for years were ripped from our throats, leaving raw wounds in their wake. Hours later, exhausted and drained, we collapsed on opposite sides of the bed. Sleep eluded me, the weight of the fight pressed down on me, suffocating. The familiar comfort of the bed felt alien, cold, and unwelcoming. Our 25-year life together, the life we'd built brick by brick, felt like a fragile house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. The future stretched before me, uncertain and terrifying. Could we rebuild what had been shattered? Or would the foundation of trust, once so strong, crumble to dust, leaving only the wreckage of our dreams? Sunday bled into existence slow and heavy, the silence in the house thick enough to choke on. We moved around each other like ghosts, the air crackling with unspoken words and shattered trust. Every cough, every rustle of the newspaper felt magnified, a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. Breakfast was a silent affair, coffee and toast consumed without a single glance in each other's direction. The tension hung heavy in the air, a suffocating weight on my chest. Monday morning arrived, a monotonous echo of the broken weekend. Sarah, looking pale and drawn, surprised me by suggesting couples therapy. A flicker of hope sparked in my chest, a fragile butterfly battling the storm of doubt swirling within me. Maybe it could help, I stammered, the words catching in my throat. The therapist's office was sterile, the beige walls offering no solace. We sat awkwardly on a worn leather couch, pouring out the wreckage of our relationship in measured tones. Her words were clinical, detached, offering tools for communication and reconciliation. A part of me clung to the hope she offered, a lifeline in a sea of despair. But the distrust lingered, a bitter aftertaste in my mouth. Every time Sarah spoke, I searched for a flicker of truth, a hint of the woman I once loved. But all I saw was a stranger, someone who shared my name but harbored secrets I couldn't even begin to fathom. The therapist suggested individual sessions too. Sarah readily agreed, a flicker of remorse, or maybe something else entirely, flitting across her eyes. Over the next few weeks, we became regulars at her office, dutifully attending both couples and individual sessions. But the sessions felt sterile, a forced attempt at CPR on a relationship that might already be dead. The therapist's words bounced off the walls, echoing in the emptiness that had become our marriage. Was this it? Was this all that was left of the life we'd built together? The hollow echo of laughter and whispered promises, replaced by a suffocating silence and a gnawing uncertainty about the future? The therapist's voice droned on about communication styles and healthy conflict resolution, but my mind was elsewhere. It felt like we were discussing the weather on a day a hurricane was about to hit. Suddenly, her words shifted, zeroing in on a specific point. Sometimes, in situations like these, there can be emotional attachments formed outside the marriage. The air in the room seemed to crackle. I stole a glance at Sarah, expecting a denial, a deflection. Instead, she was staring at the floor, her face pale and drawn. A beat of silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, barely a whisper, Sarah spoke. Yes, there was someone. The world tilted on its axis. The sterile beige walls of the therapist's office seemed to close in on me. My breath hitched, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. An affair. The word hung in the air, a dark accusation. Who? I managed to force the question out, my voice hoarse. Mark, she mumbled, the name barely audible. Colleague from work. Mark. The name jogged my memory. A tall, lanky guy with a nervous chuckle. I vaguely remembered him from a couple of work events. Someone Sarah had introduced me to in passing. How long? My voice was a low growl, barely containing the storm raging inside me. A few months, she mumbled, her eyes downcast. It just happened. A few months. The words echoed in my head, each iteration a fresh blow. Months of stolen moments, of lies whispered in the dark. Months of living a double life while I what? Went about my days oblivious. A fool trusting a stranger in my own bed? The therapist, bless her professional heart, tried to steer the conversation back on track, but all I could see was Sarah's face. Guilt was etched there. Sure, but something else flickered beneath the surface too. Was it defiance? A hint of justification? The revelation hung heavy in the air, a poisonous cloud obscuring the future. The therapy session blurred into a fog of questions and accusations. The carefully constructed facade of our marriage had crumbled, leaving behind a gaping hole filled with uncertainty and a bitter cocktail of anger and hurt. One thing was clear. The road to reconciliation, if there even was one, would be long and arduous. The trust that had taken years to build was shattered in a heartbeat. Could we ever rebuild it? Or was this the final chapter, the closing line in the story of our lives together? The car ride home from therapy was a silent war zone. The air hung heavy, thick with the unspoken words churning in my gut. Sarah sat beside me, a statue carved from ice, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Every mile felt like an eternity, each tick of the clock an accusation hammering against my skull. Reaching the house, I practically leapt out of the car, the need for fresh air, for any space away from her, suffocating me. Inside, the silence pressed down on me, a physical weight on my chest. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stranger, its walls echoing with the ghosts of our shattered life. Sleep was a distant dream that night. I tossed and turned on the couch, the familiar cushions offering no comfort. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle in the house sent a jolt of nervous energy through me. The following days were a blur of activity, a desperate attempt to keep the rising tide of emotions at bay. Lawyers materialized like vultures, circling our carcass of a marriage, their voices a droning monotone as they discussed assets and alimony. Financial discussions, once a mundane part of life, now felt like a grotesque autopsy, dissecting the very foundation of our existence. Sarah sleepwalked through it all, a ghost haunting the halls of our once happy home. The vibrancy that had once sparkled in her eyes was extinguished, replaced by a dull ache of shame. She moved with a robotic efficiency, signing papers, answering questions, but her soul seemed to be a million miles away. The house itself felt like a tomb. Every corner held a memory, a photograph, a piece of furniture, silent witnesses to the love that had bloomed and now withered. Laughter echoed in my head, a cruel reminder of happier times. Now, only the suffocating silence remained, a constant companion in this waking nightmare. The revelation of the affair had ripped the rug from under my world. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought we had built together, lay in ruins. Distrust gnawed at me like a persistent rat, leaving behind a trail of doubt and despair. Could we salvage anything from the wreckage? Or was this the final act, the curtain falling on the play of our lives? The future stretched before me, a desolate landscape shrouded in uncertainty. The realtor bustled around the living room, her voice chirping about great curb appeal and spacious entertaining areas. I followed her like a zombie, pointing out minor repairs and upgrades we'd made over the years. Each word felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of our marriage. A couple, young and eager, lingered by the fireplace. The woman's eyes snagged on a framed photo of us on our wedding day, smiles wide and naive. A laugh escaped her lips, light and carefree. The irony of it nearly choked me. The house sold faster than I expected. Standing on the curb on closing day, the moving truck filled with our belongings, felt surreal. The new owners, a young family with excited children, buzzed with anticipation as they unlocked the door. We were an afterthought, ghosts fading away from the life we'd built here. Two separate apartments became our new realities. The silence was deafening. No more shared routines, no clinking of coffee mugs in the morning, no late-night whispers about our day. Just the hollow echo of loneliness bouncing off the bare walls. I threw myself into work, seeking refuge in the familiar grind. Bills piled up, emails demanded attention, deadlines loomed. But the work offered little solace. Sarah's face flashed in my mind during every pause, a constant reminder of the gaping hole in my life. Social media became a minefield. Mutual friends posting pictures of happy families and weekend getaways felt like a personal attack. Their joy seemed to mock my misery. With a few clicks, I unfollowed most of them, retreating further into my self-imposed isolation. The world outside seemed to move on in a blur, oblivious to the earthquake that had shattered my life. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. The anger, the hurt, the suffocating sense of betrayal, it all lingered, a festering wound that refused to heal. One night, staring at the blank ceiling of my sterile apartment, a question echoed in the emptiness. Could I ever forgive her? Could we ever rebuild the trust we'd so carelessly destroyed? Or was this truly the end? The final chapter in a love story gone tragically wrong? The answer, as elusive as ever, hung suspended in the darkness. A rap on the door shattered the silence of my apartment, jolting me out of the gloom that had become my constant companion. Warily, I peered through the peephole. It was Mrs. Henderson, the kind-faced elderly lady who lived across the hall from us in the old house. Surprise washed over me. We hadn't spoken since the moving truck had hauled away the last of our belongings. Hesitantly, I opened the door. Mrs. Henderson stood there, a casserole dish and a bottle of wine cradled in her arms. Her eyes, usually twinkling with amusement, were filled with a gentle concern that sent a prickle of warmth down my spine. "Just wanted to check in, dear," she said, her voice soft. "Saw the lights on and thought you could use a home-cooked meal." Before I could stammer out a response, she bustled past me, filling the sterile apartment with the warm aroma of spices and herbs. The unexpected gesture, so simple yet so profound, felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. For hours we sat at the kitchen table, the casserole forgotten as memories, both happy and sad, tumbled out. Tears flowed freely, mixed with bursts of laughter as we reminisced about late-night barbecues and the time our cat got stuck in the Christmas tree. It wasn't a solution, not a magic fix for the gaping hole in my life, but Mrs. Henderson's visit was a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone in my grief. Slowly, tentatively at first, other friends reached out. Phone calls, hesitant texts, eventually even invitations for coffee or a beer. Their support, though initially awkward, was a comforting anchor in the storm that had become my life. Months bled into one another. The raw pain dulled to a constant ache, a dull throb that never quite went away. But amidst the heartache, tiny glimmers of hope began to flicker. I started running again, pounding the pavement until my legs burned, the endorphins a welcome escape from the relentless thoughts. One day, at the grocery store, I bumped into a former colleague, Mark. After the initial surprise, we fell into conversation, catching up on the years since we'd last spoken. He mentioned a new photography class he was taking, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. The conversation sparked something long dormant within me. Dusting off my old camera, a forgotten relic from a happier time, I signed up for the same class. The click of the shutter, the smell of developing chemicals in the darkroom, the thrill of capturing a perfect shot, all of it brought back a forgotten sense of joy. The class became a refuge. For a few hours each week, I could lose myself in the world of light and shadow, the composition and focus. It wasn't a cure-all, but it was a start, a tiny step towards rebuilding a life shattered by betrayal. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, a flicker of hope danced on the horizon. The official document landed on the table with a dull thud. Divorce decree, the lawyer announced, his voice devoid of any emotion. Finality slammed into me, a physical blow that knocked the wind out of my lungs. 25 years reduced to a piece of paper with legalese. The pain was still there, a dull ache that resided deep within me. But beneath it, a strange sense of clarity bloomed. The life I knew might be gone, buried under the rubble of betrayal and heartbreak. But there was still a future out there, waiting to be written. Weeks turned into months, the raw edges of grief slowly smoothing into a dull ache. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself staring at Sarah's number in my phone's contact list. My finger hovered over the call button, a mixture of trepidation and a strange sense of purpose warring within me. With a deep breath, I pressed the call. The silence on the other end stretched until Sarah's voice, hesitant and uncertain, filled the receiver. We talked for a while, the conversation stilted at first, then flowing with a newfound honesty. There were no accusations, no angry outbursts, just two people acknowledging the wreckage of what we once had, the dreams that had turned to dust. A quiet acceptance settled between us, a bridge built tentatively over the chasm that had opened up. Life continued, a slow and steady march forward. I reconnected with old friends, joined a hiking group, explored the city with a newfound sense of curiosity. The world, once viewed through a filter of anger and hurt, began to regain its vibrancy. There were still moments, of course, when the past ambushed me, a familiar song on the radio, a scent that triggered a memory. The sadness would wash over me, a bittersweet reminder of what I'd lost. But the anger had faded, replaced by a, "You think cheaters always get away with it? Think again." I had this buddy, Mark, solid guy. Thought his wife was the same. Turns out, secrets ain't just for keeping. They're like time bombs waiting to blow your whole life sky high. You see, I fell for Mark's wife, Sarah. Yeah, I know, I'm the worst. One stolen kiss, and it was a race to see how far we could fall. The lies got bigger, the sneaking around got riskier. We were playing with fire, man, and let me tell you, we got burned. This ain't your average heartbreak story. This is about how one stupid decision wrecked families, shattered friendships, and turned my entire world into a damn war zone. You ready for this? It gets messy. The whole "your wife fancies you" thing was a punch in the gut. I mean, come on, Mark, your best mate, is this some kind of weird test? I tossed and turned that night, her face, Sarah's face, flashing through my mind. The next morning, I felt like I'd been run over. Should I tell my wife? Nah, that'd open a whole other can of worms. Best to just forget the whole damn thing. Couple of days pass, and I'm starting to think I imagined the whole conversation. But then there's a Facebook message waiting for me. It's her, Sarah. My stomach flips. Turns out Mark wasn't messing around. Her messages are playful, flirty, bold. It's like she's the cat and I'm some poor mouse she's got cornered. I try to resist, but there's no denying it. The spark is lit. Soon, a couple of messages turns into late-night chats, the kind I haven't had since I was a lovesick teenager. I know this is dangerous territory, but the thrill of the forbidden, it's intoxicating. One Tuesday, I end up working late. Instead, I find myself at Mark and Sarah's place. He's out of town for the night. It's meant to be just a quick visit, the excuse about catching up with both of them. But as Sarah talks, her eyes glinting with that knowing spark, all my willpower crumbles. Before I know it, we're in a desperate clinch, the world outside shrinking away. That's when it starts. The sneaking around, the stolen moments, the constant lies. Every time I look at Mark, the guilt eats away at me. Am I really low enough to betray my oldest friend this way? But Sarah, she somehow wormed her way into my head. The rush of it all masks the sinking feeling that this is a runaway train, and I'm tied to the tracks. I never realized grocery shopping could be so damn exhilarating. There I was, standing in the cereal aisle beside Sarah, our carts almost touching. Suddenly, finding the right kind of granola felt like a life or death situation. We're pretending this is some random run-in, but there's zero chance anyone would buy that. After the grocery store, there's the coffee shop detour. We sit at a corner table, knees brushing, the hum of the cafe fading into the background as she throws me a mischievous grin. The air between us is charged, and I'm desperately trying to play it cool while my insides are on fire. With her leaning in, all I can think about is Mark's trusting face and how easily I'm destroying it with every innocent-looking latte. The lies come easier than I ever thought they would. Oh, meeting ran late, traffic was hell, yeah, had to pull an extra shift. My wife doesn't doubt me, but I see a flicker of concern in her eyes. She senses something's off, but she can't pinpoint the exact reason. It's only a matter of time before suspicion cracks through. My phone has basically become a ticking time bomb. I've switched Sarah's name to something boring, set the ringtone to silent, and I jump at the slightest vibration. Each text from her requires a calculated response. Not too eager, not too dismissive. It's all a carefully crafted illusion, and I'm the architect of my own deception. When Mark calls, my heart sinks. His voice is cheerful, oblivious to the that I'm sweating bullets. He talks about weekend plans, a double date, and I have to force myself to sound enthusiastic. The irony is suffocating. Later, Sarah texts something fiery, and all I can picture is Mark laughing, completely clueless to the betrayal I'm orchestrating behind his back. Maybe I'm a terrible person, because despite the guilt, the thrill of the chase still hasn't worn off. It's a sick game, and I'm already in way too deep. Sarah's apartment smells like jasmine and some other scent I can't place.
Sin, Mabi.
That's the thing about this whole twisted mess. It's poisoned every part of me. I can't think straight, sleep straight. I'm a malfunctioning robot pretending to be a normal husband and dad. Every time I sneak out to see her, it's like playing Russian roulette. Checking over my shoulder in parking lots, glancing at my reflection in windows, praying I don't see someone I know. Paranoia's got its claws in me, whispering that at any second, the bottom's going to drop out. But then I'm with her, and the fear recedes. Her touch sends shockwaves through me. Her laughter makes my pulse race. We're building our own little world, one stolen hour at a time. Except, I know it's a flimsy house of cards. It's perched on lies, and the slightest breeze could tear it all apart. My old phone sits on a dusty shelf. That's my real-life phone calls from my kids, messages from work. My secret phone buzzes, and my heart leaps. It's Sarah, and every text is another nail in the coffin of my sanity. We get sloppy, lingering too long outside her building, letting a kiss stretch out in the driveway. Each reckless move ups the ante. Screw Mark, Sarah hisses, her fingers tangled in my hair. This is real, he doesn't deserve you, and for a dangerous second, I almost believe her. The night everything changes starts just like the others. I lie to my wife some half-baked excuse about a project, and then I'm racing to Sarah. But there's a strange twist in my gut of feeling I can't shake. It's not guilt, not fear. It's a sense of inevitability, like the trap has finally been sprung, and I'm the oblivious rat walking straight into it. My hands won't stop shaking. I'm parked outside this dingy motel, Sarah asleep beside me, and all I can think about is blowing up our sorry little escape. I should march straight home, tell my wife everything, maybe even show her the string of filthy texts, beg for forgiveness or at least punishment. Anything would be better than this limbo. But as the sun starts to rise, painting the motel room in a sickly pink, Sarah stirs. Her eyes lock with mine, heavy with sleep and a familiar hunger. Just like that, the resolve slips away, replaced with a sickening wave of desire and self-loathing. I'm hooked, addicted to this twisted game even though I know the only possible ending is devastation. Back home, the lies keep piling up. My wife gives me a concerned look, asks if I'm okay, and I deflect, muttering something about stress. Inside, I'm dying 1,000 deaths. Every time the phone rings, I practically leap out of my skin. What if it's Mark? Has he figured it out? Is some stranger calling my house with a blackmail scheme? It's amazing how quickly your mind can invent fresh new terrors when you're this deep in deceit. At dinner, I force myself to swallow down the bland chicken, all the while imagining the scene with Mark that's inevitable. Him standing there, broken-hearted and furious. He won't hit me, that's not his style. He'll just look at me with absolute contempt, the kind that burns worse than any punch ever could. That night, I dream of courtroom trials, of my children's tear-streaked faces. I wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. My life is a horror movie, and I'm the architect of my own destruction. Sarah calls. It's code now, business jargon, fake names about clients. But I can barely focus on her words. All I hear is that ticking clock in my head, counting down to the moment the bomb goes off. And the really messed up part? I'm not even sure I want to stop it. I don't recognize myself anymore. I see him in the mirror, this pale, haunted stranger, and I hate what he's become. But cutting ties with Sarah is not something I can even fathom. She's sunk her claws into me too deep. Every meeting makes her bolder. No more hushed whispers in dim corners. Now it's hand-holding across restaurant tables, the brazen way she slides into the passenger seat of my car. We're daring fate to strike us down, and part of me knows it's a matter of when, not if. The day it almost unravels is seared into my brain. We're at the supermarket, a risky move, but she insisted. As we turn down the coffee aisle, a familiar voice jolts me. It's Linda, my neighbor, chatting away. If she turns that corner, I yank Sarah away, my face burning. Let's go, I forgot something. Her eyes narrow in suspicion, but she follows, for now. My heart's pounding like it's going to burst from my chest for the rest of the day. If Linda saw even a glimpse, the rumors will spread like wildfire. Mark's misery ramps up a notch. He drops by my office, unloads about Sarah's moods, their fights. I sit there, the picture of concerned sympathy, while my soul squirms. It's torture I bring on myself. He needs a friend and confides in the man who's tearing his world apart. Sarah's not making this easier. There's a new possessiveness in her, a neediness that makes me uneasy. She calls too much, wants to know my every move. When I push back, a flash of something ugly crosses her face. You think I'd let you walk away? After everything? It was meant to sound playful, but my blood runs cold. Suddenly, it's not just about the affair, it's about her. What depths is she capable of? What will she do if I try to end this? My lies fall apart faster than I can spin them. Excuses for work crumble, my stories get jumbled. My wife's patience is wearing thin, her eyes searching mine for answers. It's like a car crash in slow motion, and there's nothing I can do to swerve out of the way. I just have to wait for the inevitable impact. The text was an accident. A stupid, drunken fumble late one night, meant for Sarah and somehow hitting Mark's number. Words I shouldn't even think, let alone type out, beamed straight to my best friend's phone. Took seconds to realize my mistake, but the damage was done. The next morning, I wake up to a voicemail from Mark. His voice is low, a dangerous calm. We need to talk. Come over now, my stomach lurches. If he read that text, my entire world is about to implode. Frantically, I come up with idiotic excuses for my wife urgent work crisis. Surprise call. She sees right through my lies. Her eyes, once filled with concern, are now hard with suspicion. On the drive over to Mark's, all I can think is this might be the last time I see them, my family, before everything falls apart. Sarah's not answering her phone. Useless. I need to control the damage, but my mind is a jumbled mess. Mark greets me at the door, no handshake, no forced smile, just that grim set to his jaw. He ushers me into the living room, the same room where we've had countless beers, watched countless games. Feels foreign now. Cut the crap, he spits. What the hell's going on with you and Sarah? He holds up his phone, screen flashing that damning text. My lies crumple like wet paper. All I can manage is pathetic apologies, weak denials. He doesn't buy it. Fury explodes in his eyes, the kind of rage that makes him unrecognizable. He's ready to throw me out, maybe beat me down. Instead, he drops a chilling line. Get out. Think about how you're going to tell your wife. The drive home is a blur. I make it inside somehow, legs leaden. I can't look my wife in the eye. Guilt and shame choke me. The coward's way out is to run, disappear. But some shred of decency keeps me rooted in place. The next few days are a living hell. Sarah's furious, hissing accusations, alternating with desperate pleas for me not to leave her. My phone lighting up with unknown numbers and hang-ups makes me jumpy. Has Mark told everyone? Are strangers about to expose me? Then it comes. The email to Mark's work inbox. A single blurry photo me and Sarah locked in a kiss. No sender name, no message, just the damning proof of my betrayal. All my careful lies, my pathetic attempts at control, are useless now. The bomb has gone off and the fallout is going to be devastating. The silence in the aftermath of Mark's fury is worse than any shouting. He doesn't even look at me, just moves like a machine packing Sarah's stuff. Her tears and pathetic attempts to defend herself fall on deaf ears. Mark's a man transformed, the good-hearted buddy replaced by this cold, merciless stranger. They're gone with a slam of the door. It echoes through my house, my soul. Mark's last words ring in my ears, the most dangerous kind. He's right, I was the snake in the grass, the one nobody saw coming. Facing my wife is the next circle of hell. How do you even start that conversation? Every time I open my mouth, pathetic excuses die on my lips. She sees through me. Finally, I choke the truth out. Spills forth ugly and vile. The sneaking around, the lies, the photo that blew it all apart. She doesn't explode, doesn't throw things. Instead, a chilling calm settles over her. Her voice is low, words carefully chosen. You disgust me, get out of my sight. It's not a request, it's an order. And for the first time in this whole mess, I obey without question. The kids are confused. They saw the yelling with Mark. Sense something horrible is happening. I want to comfort them, explain, but there is no explanation, no fixing this. I pack a pathetic bag and leave, the coward fleeing his own wreckage. Motel rooms become my new home. The news is alight with the gossip. Apparently, Mark made no secret of it, I'm the town's new villain. Sarah the scheming seductress. My face might as well be plastered on a most wanted poster. Work calls, relentless at first, turn to an ominous silence. No severance, no polite email. Just termination, the professional word for a death sentence. Sarah tries to reach out, a mix of fury and some warped version of needing me. But I ignore her. There's nothing to salvage from what we had. I'm drowning, and she's just another weight pulling me down. Sleep offers no escape. Nightmares of Mark's face twisted with hatred. My wife's tear-streaked face. My kids backing away from me in fear. It's torture my guilty mind orchestrates. I bolt awake, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. Some nights, the only way to numb the pain is to drink myself into a stupor. It doesn't bring oblivion, just makes it all worse. The world keeps spinning, heedless of my spectacular fall from grace. I'm the ghost now, haunting dingy motels, peering from behind drawn curtains at a world that wants nothing to do with me. Shame is a relentless stalker, my constant shadow. My parents find out. It's my sister who calls, voice tight with barely concealed contempt. My dad is a man of few words, but I hear the disappointment crushing down on him through the phone line. My mom, she just weeps. It's a sound that'll haunt me forever. Word gets back to me about my family. My kids refuse to visit, barely speak to me on the phone. My wife's hired a fire-breathing lawyer. Divorce proceedings are a freight train barreling towards me. It's all deserved. Nothing softens the blow. No excuses I can tell myself anymore. Then the physical symptoms start. Chest pains in the middle of the night send me to a grimy ER, convinced I'm having a heart attack. Turns out it's panic attacks, my body short-circuiting under the weight of guilt. The doctor scribbles a prescription, Xanax, my new crutch, to numb the constant anxiety eating me alive. Sarah's not faring any better. Word is she's crashing at a friend's place. Mark's kicked her to the curb too. She calls sometimes, ranting, threatening, sometimes just sobbing. I want to cut her off entirely, but a twisted, pathetic part of me still clings to some warped sense of connection. We're the only ones who understand this particular kind of hell. One rainy afternoon, I see Mark. It's in the grocery store of all places. He's gaunt, eyes shadowed, but the hatred blazing in them is as bright as ever. I try to mumble an apology, but he just turns away, disgust written on his back. We used to buy beer in this aisle, joke about football. Now we're just strangers who despise each other to the very core. Back at the motel, a letter slides under the door. No stamp, just my name scrawled on it. It's from my wife. One page, words like knives. She's not talking about reconciliation, it's about obliteration. My life as I knew it doesn't just have cracks, it's been atomized. Waking up is the worst part. It's those first few seconds when reality hasn't sucker punched me yet, and then my brain catches up. The cheap motel mattress, the stale smell of booze and desperation, the crushing weight of knowing I've thrown away everything that mattered. Days bleed into each other. I drink to numb the pain, and then drink to numb the hangover. It's a vicious cycle that's dragging me under. I barely even leave the room, the outside world a terrifying stage full of accusing glares and whispered judgments. One bleary night, I decide to walk outside. Just a few blocks, maybe get some pathetic fast food to soak up the booze. It's on that grimy street corner that I see Sarah. She's thinner, a ghost of the woman who once lured me in. We stare at each other, united by our shared ruin. For a moment, the anger flares again, the urge to blame her. But looking at her, I just feel a bone-deep weariness. What's the point in more recriminations? We both played our part in this mess, both architects of our own downfall. We talk, a strained conversation on a dirty sidewalk, and then part ways without a backward glance. That night, I hit my absolute low. The Xanax and whiskey mix into a dangerous cocktail, and I wake up in a hospital bed. Overdose. Not some noble attempt at escape, just carelessness born from despair. The look in the overworked nurse's eyes mixes pity with a hint of disgust. It's the nudge I desperately need. A therapist is recommended. Some low-cost clinic, more out of pity than anything else. I hate it at first, poking around in the wreckage of my past, the screwed-up reasons why I craved the rush of the affair. The slow, agonizing work. There are no easy answers, no instant forgiveness. Word trickles back that Mark's found someone new. Surprisingly, it doesn't stir jealousy, just a dull ache in my chest. He deserves happiness. Me? Well, that's a much harder question. A letter arrives, Mark's handwriting again. In it, he details all the practical things. Selling the house, the financial devastation I've caused him. His anger is cold, clinical, and it cuts deeper than any shouting ever could. So here I am. Broken, alone, trying to piece together some kind of existence out of the ashes of my old life. Am I on the path to redemption? Hell if I know. Some days, just getting out of bed feels like a victory. Other days, the darkness still calls, and I'm not sure I have the strength to fight it off forever. Turns out, rock bottom has a basement level one hadn't even considered. The court finalizes my divorce. The words on the official papers are dry, devoid of emotion, yet they cut like shards of glass. A retrievable breakdown of the marriage. I become a walking, talking cliché, a cautionary tale. I lose track of how long I've been living in that crappy motel. Weeks, months, it all blurs together. One morning, driven by desperation or maybe some flicker of self-preservation, I force myself out. Sunlight hurts my eyes, and the simple act of walking to the bus stop feels like climbing Everest. A faded poster catches my eye. Soup kitchen, volunteers needed. It's a pathetically small thing to do, but I need something beyond wallowing in guilt and cheap booze. Turns out, handing out warm meals to homeless folks is humbling in a way I never expected. Their struggles dwarf my own, yet some of them smile, genuinely smile, at me. It's like a tiny crack in the wall of misery I've built around myself. Therapy is still a slog. Talking about myself makes my skin crawl, but some days I make breakthroughs. Turns out, my dad was distant when I was a kid, and my mom, well, she put me on a pedestal that no person could ever live up to. It's not an excuse, but it's a start. Word gets back to me that my kids miss me. At least, that's what my sister tells me with a wary look. It's the first shred of hope I've felt in ages. I write letters, long, handwritten apologies that I don't even expect them to read, at least not at first. But it's a start. My parents tentatively offer a lifeline. I can move back home for a while, get a job, get back on my feet. Pride makes me hesitate, but desperation wins. Sleeping on their fold-out couch is a hell of a lot better than those motel mattresses. Turns out, Mark and Sarah are still a toxic disaster. She's apparently moved back in with him. Their fights the talk of the town. People look at me with a strange mix of pity and revulsion as the details filter through the grapevine. I deserve every bit of it. Then there's Emily. We meet at the soup kitchen, both painfully aware we don't belong on this side of the serving table. She's got haunted eyes, the kind that have seen too much. Turns out, her husband ran off with her best friend. We share a dark understanding, an unspoken bond in the pain we've both endured and inflicted. She doesn't judge me, and in return, I just listen. The path to fixing my life seems longer than I ever imagined. Some days I take baby steps forward, others I stumble back. But at least now I'm walking. I'll never be who I once was. Maybe redemption is too much to hope for, but for the first time in forever, the future doesn't seem like a gaping, empty void. It's just unknown. And for Janet and I were married for 12 years. We have been lovers since we were 10 years old. I was never interested in college, so I got an entry-level job at Desmond Engineering as a draftsman straight out of high school. A year later, Janet and I got married, and the following year we became the proud parents of twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Things were tough for the first few years, but we watched our pennies and things seemed to work out. I was still a draftsman, but I was a few grades higher than when I started. Money was better, but still tight. We managed to save enough money to buy a small house, and we had 2 nice cars. They weren't new, but they weren't old-fashioned either. Janet always wanted to be a housewife, so she never worked. We didn't need any extra money, so that was fine with me. We were both healthy and in good shape. Janet was a little stockier than when we got married, but not by much. She was just over 5 feet tall and had dark brown hair with bangs. She looked like little Marie Osmond. I haven't changed at all. I played right tackle on the high school football team, so I wasn't small, but I wasn't flabby either. Billy Martin moved to Reading from Lancaster about a year ago and took a job with Desmond Engineering as a surveyor. Billy and I played football against each other and immediately became friends. He also married his high school sweetheart, a redhead named Sarah. Sarah and Janet became instant friends. They didn't have children yet, but they were ideal nannies. When we weren't at work, Billy and I enjoyed each other's company. It was a pleasant break away from my wives. Of course, Janet and Sarah did the same. They went shopping together, went to parties and club meetings, and Billy and I watched the girls on TV. Sarah also took a job as a secretary at Gilbert Engineering, located just outside the city. I started noticing some things about 6 months ago. Previously, the PDA meeting was held once a month, but now it is once a week. Sarah didn't have children, but she always went to see Janet. The frequency of Tupperware and Magic Chef parties seemed to increase every month, but they never bought anything. They joined a book club, but never seemed to find time to read. On weekends they spent hours shopping, but bought very little. Janet's collection of fashionable lingerie seemed to be growing, but I never got to enjoy any of it. It started eating me. I never mentioned anything to Billy because he didn't seem to care. I didn't want to cause problems if something happened. About an hour after I put the girls to bed, Janet came home from some kind of basket party. She took a shower before Sarah picked her up, and took another as soon as she got home. This seemed strange to me. While she was in the shower, I quickly checked the basket and found a set of black lace lingerie. Who would wear black lace lingerie to a basket party? I'm not in the habit of checking my wife's panties, but I did this tonight and found that the panties were wet and sticky. I put them in my pocket. Until tonight, I had never once rummaged through my wife's purse or wallet. The only thing I was really interested in was her cell phone. Apparently, she was pretty sure I wouldn't spy because she hadn't deleted a single call in the last week. The majority of calls were addressed to Sarah, but a large number of incoming and outgoing calls were addressed to KC, KH, and KW. Of course, I had no idea who they were, but I quickly realized that the C stood for cell, the H stood for home, and the W probably stood for work. I checked her address book, and Sarah also had 3 numbers listed: Sarah S., Sarah H., and Sarah W. I was amazed at how well organized my wife's phone was. I looked at Sarah's work number and noticed that it had an extension. I looked at KW's number, and it was the same number as Sarah but with a different extension. It wasn't hard to guess that Janet was calling and receiving calls from someone who worked with Sarah. It was also easy to guess that Sarah must have been the one who introduced Janet and the mysterious company, K. Gilbert. Engineering was now closed, so I took Janet's phone and called KW's number. Hello. You approach Ken Sanders' desk. I'm not at the table right now, but if you leave your name and phone number, I will contact you as soon as I can. I hung up immediately after the signal. It was too easy. John, are you going to bed? Janet simply poked her head around the doorway. I'm almost finished with this book. I'll get up as soon as I finish it if I don't fall asleep on the sofa. Of course, I had every intention of sleeping on the couch. It was a restless night. I kept trying to figure out what I did wrong or what I could have done differently. It was a terrible waste of time and mental effort. Every time I redirected my thoughts to what I should do, they kept coming back to what I should do. I kept looking at the clock, and it didn't move. All I knew for sure was that I was not going to take any blame for what happened or what was going to happen. I woke up to the sounds of my 2 little angels cooking breakfast. Janet encouraged them to take care of themselves rather than wait. It was a good idea, and it seemed to work. I was stretching and scratching myself when my wife entered the room. You better hurry up, John, or you'll be late for work. No problem. I'm not going to work today. Why? You never miss work. Too many personal problems? I yawned and trudged towards the bathroom. I needed a shower. Janet looked a little puzzled. When I returned, the girls had already left for school. I took a cup of coffee and sat down at the table opposite my wife. She looked at me reluctantly, as if expecting something, but not knowing what. Janet, tell me about your novel. I didn't want to beat around the bush, but I almost knew she wasn't going to just open up and bare her soul. Be serious, John. Is that why you're moping? Do you really think I'm cheating on you? Yes. Now tell me about your novel. We've been married 12 years, John. Why would you even think such a thing? Janet, I have work to do today, and I'm not going to sit here and play games with you. I'll ask you again. Tell me about your novel. My loving wife let out an exasperated sigh and leaned towards me. John, it's all in your head. There is no romance here. Well, I'd like to thank you for your honesty, but I can't right now, can I? She leaned back in her chair and sipped her coffee, as if she had taken control of the situation. Can you answer me a few simple questions? Yes, John, of course. What would you like to know? Why do you go to PDA meetings every week? Even though the PDA secretary says they only have monthly meetings, and you haven't been to one in 6 months. I do not understand what you're saying. She was a little less sassy. You and Sarah go to non-existent PDA meetings every Tuesday. Why would you lie about something like that? Janet pondered the question for a while and then found the answer. I'm truly sorry, John. It's ladies' night at Rosie's Cantina on Tuesday, and Sarah and I are going for 2-for-1 margaritas. We didn't want you and Billy to think we were messing around, so you didn't tell us. It was a mistake, and I'm very sorry. From now on, we will inform you. Nice try, Janet. Of course you know that I will check this. I'm sure Sarah will support you. But what about the people from Rosie? John, you're getting more out of this. When you go to little Tupperware parties and things like that, why do you take a shower before you leave and another when you get home? She was in no hurry again. A lot of women smoke at these parties. When I come home, I want to get rid of the smell of my hair. It's not a big deal, John. Why do you wear fancy underwear to go to these parties? You never wear sexy things for me unless it's a special night. Every evening you spend with these housewives, you wear your best. Why? I don't have a good answer to this question. I just want to feel dressed up sometimes when I go out. Her lies began to irritate me. It's time to put an end to this. I was angry, and it was difficult to control. These are the panties you wore last night. I threw them on the table. When you came home, the squat was wet and covered in something sticky. I know what the hell sperm is, and I know it's not mine. Don't try to tell me you have a yeast infection, or I swear I will hit you. Janet was squirming in her chair at this moment. She tried not to look at me. There didn't seem to be a quick answer. Damn it, Janet. Why did you come home with cum-stained panties last night? I want an answer. Stop it, John. Just stop it. I can't stand it anymore. We've been married for 12 years. How can you treat me like this? The continuous stream of lies and constant denial finally got to me. With all the strength I could muster, I threw my half-filled coffee cup across the room, smashing the front of the microwave. This time, there was no doubt that I had Janet's attention. I had never seen that expression on her face before, because she had never seen me angry before. Leaning across the table, I looked directly at her and spoke louder than before. Who the hell is Ken Sanders? She got out of the chair and back towards the sink, trying to get away from me. Last time. Who the hell is Ken Sanders? A friend. Just a friend. She was scared to death when those words came out of her mouth. Did you have sex with him? Yes. Yes, I had sex with him. Did you have sex with him last night? Yes. Yes, I did it. Stop it, John. Please stop this. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Just stop, please. She stood at the sink and bawled like crazy. I took a cup out of the cupboard and poured myself some fresh coffee. As I started to sit down, Janet's cell phone rang. Her eyes darted from me to the phone and back to me. This is from Ken. I think we better answer. I pressed the speakerphone button and answered the call. Good morning, sugar. I just came to work and saw that last night you tried to call me on my work number. Did you forget something at home? Janet, or should I say Sugar, seemed distressed. There was a moment of silence. Janet, are you here? Is there something wrong? She looked at me with a petrified expression. I nodded back to her. Ken. She hesitated. Ken, my husband, is here. He knows about us. He has his phone on speaker. He didn't hang up, but he didn't answer either. I felt obligated to let him off the hook. Ken, good buddy. I have some things I need to do this morning, but I promised to come see you this afternoon. Maybe you should put 911 on your speed dial. I ended the call and put the phone back in my pocket. Janet just stood at the sink in her robe, shaking. I have to go. I have one more question. What is the name of the guy Sarah is dating? John, no, please don't make me. The second cup flew across the room and crashed into the tiled wall behind the sink. She jumped back and couldn't speak fast enough. Kelvin Bostic. I'll be back this afternoon. Remove all your belongings before this time. My mom will stay with the girls until we make other arrangements. Anything you can't fit in your car, I'll get it for you. Let my mother know where you will be. Do not call me. She didn't move or say anything else as I walked out the door. Of course, I had no idea what to do next. I decided to go into the office and see Billy. I thought of him as a friend and felt that he should know what was going on. It was pretty easy to figure out that Sarah met Kelvin at work and became friends with him. Ken was probably Kelvin's friend who needed a date. I may have simplified this a bit, but I thought it was close enough. Billy was not in the office. He was on the spot setting some bets or something like that. I called him on his cell phone. Billy, I don't want to bother you, but I have bad news. Is someone injured? Not yet, but they will. What the hell are you talking about, John? Janet and Sarah got themselves a couple of boyfriends. On all those nights when they had to go to meetings and Tupperware parties, they actually got together. You are sure? I don't believe you, John. Sounds like some kind of nonsense to me. Ask Sarah about a guy named Calvin Bostic. He works with her in Gilbert. I think she introduced Janet to another guy from there. Damn, are you sure? Damn it, John. I know Calvin Bostic. We were in the same graduating class. What about a guy named Ken Sanders? Yes, him too. Tall, skinny guy. Billy, I believe Janet is going to warn Sarah as soon as she can. Janet gave me a whole lot of crap this morning before I pinned her down. I'm sure you'll get the same from Sarah. Billy hung up and I went to HR to ask for a short leave. I didn't feel like working right now. It only took 10 minutes to transfer all the work I was doing to another draftsman. Around the same time, Janet's cell phone rang. Caller ID showed it was Sarah. Janet, what the hell is going on? Billy just called me. He arrives at the office. I think someone said something to him. I didn't answer her. Janet, are you here? Now is not the best time to play. Hi, Sarah. This is John. I had to borrow Janet's cell phone this morning. Mine was dead. Janet, what are you talking about, Sarah? What exactly did someone say to Billy? Couldn't help it. At that moment, I felt angry and disgusted. I'm so sorry, John. I thought I was calling Janet. I'll try to take her home. I don't think you should bother her right now. She is very busy packing all her things. She doesn't have time to chat. What do you mean pack her things? She's going back to live with her parents for a while. The pause on the other end of the line was funny. I smiled as I imagined all the scenarios running through Sarah's head. I think it would be more important for you to tell Calvin that Billy is on his way. He could probably use a head start. Oh God, no. This can't be true.
No, no.
She hung up. This woman's nerves. We only had one credit card, so canceling it was no problem. We also had an ATM or a debit card. Took me 5 minutes to change the PIN number. I had no idea what to do with the checking account, so I just ignored it for now. In any case, I needed it to pay utilities and other bills. I just hoped Janet didn't take any receipts with her. The cell phone rang again. But this time it was my phone. Billy chased Calvin Bostic out of the Gilbert building and caught him in the parking lot. He was in jail and wanted me to tell his brother from Lancaster to come and post bail for him. I called his brother. There was nothing more I could do for Billy, so I went to Taco Bell. After lunch, I went to visit my mom and dad. I explained everything to them. Mom was more than willing to watch the girls for a while. She stayed with me during the week, and the twins stayed with them on the weekends. Now it's time to visit Ken Sanders. The guys in Gilbert's drafting department were eager to tell me about Billy's visit that morning. The drafting department overlooks the parking lot, and they saw everything that happened. Billy caught Calvin before he could get to his BMW. He threw him over the hood of one of the cars and started smashing his face. The guards followed them and tried unsuccessfully to get Billy out. Finally, one of them hit Billy in the neck with a stun gun. He wasn't home yet when they put him in the police car. They had to take Calvin in an ambulance. One of the guys showed me the office where Ken Sanders worked. It was empty. Looks like old Ken quit suddenly this morning. We walked past Sarah's desk. She wasn't there either, but it looked like she was still working there. 10 minutes later, I found out Ken's home address and headed to the parking lot. It was a small ranch with no garage. There was a white Lexus in the driveway with the trunk and back doors open. As I approached the door, Ken Sanders came out with an armful of clothes. He dropped everything and rushed back into the house as soon as he saw me. I tripped over the things he dropped and managed to see him exit out the back as I entered. I had to laugh at his reaction. Damn, I wasn't like Billy. I was a good guy. It looked like the kind of place that would be rented fully furnished. That's why he didn't have a truck. In another 10 minutes, he would have finished and left town. I was looking forward to talking to Ken, but I didn't want to chase him. I looked around the room for anything interesting and got a few pleasant surprises. The first thing I picked up was his cell phone. It lay on the table in the living room next to a folder containing his passport and some personal documents. There was a cute little laptop computer on the dining table. I couldn't find anything else, so I packed up the few goodies I had and left. I didn't want to do anything that could be considered criminal, so I resisted the urge to crash his car. This was beautiful. I think it was a crime to take things out of the house, but damn, he left the door open and anyone could have taken them. Unable to fully control myself, I let the air out of just one of his tires. He'd have to empty the truck to get to the spare tire, and I'm sure he'd do it with one eye on the street looking for me. I'll pick it up later. He received the message. I went into the prison to see Billy. His brother was there, and they were busy with legal matters, so I just waved and smiled at him. He seemed to have everything under control. Mom was already at home and dinner had begun. We talked for a bit, and then I took the things I bought from Ken into the office, where I kept my computer and everything. Before I could take a closer look, Beth and Britt returned from school. I decided it would be best to tell them what was going on before they asked. I didn't have a chance. "Hi, Dad. What is Grandma doing here? Where's Mom?" Bethany beat me to it. "Your mother and I decided to take a little break from each other. She will live with her parents for a while." Brittany started to smile, and Beth rolled her eyes and groaned. "I win. Ha, ha, I'm winning. I told you." Britt was gloating about something, and her sister was frowning. "What's happening? What's so funny?" Brittany volunteered to explain. "Beth and I had an argument. I said your mom cheated on you, and she said that would never happen. Looks like I won. I never said anything about your mother cheating. We are not stupid, Dad, and don't treat us like children. We know what's going on. I just didn't want to admit it. Britt is right. Mom is cheating on you." "How did you know this?" "I just found out. You're a little slow, Dad, and too trusting." Britt put her hand on my shoulder. It was strange. A 12-year-old girl trying to console her father. One Saturday when Mom and Sarah said they were going shopping at King of Prussia, Mom wouldn't let Britt and I go with her. She said it was an adult shopping day, and she would compensate us for it later. When we got to school on Monday, 2 kids said they saw her with a guy in Nobles Grove. We called them liars, but one of the girls had a photo on her cell phone. It seemed pretty trivial. I thought there must be an explanation, but Britt said she was cheating. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" They both just shrugged. A couple of weeks later, Tracy Mercer's parents saw Sarah, Mom, and 2 guys at TGI Fridays in Allentown. They told Tracy about it when they got home. I sat dumbfounded. Thank God Grandma invited us to dinner. We didn't discuss the issue during dinner, and I apologized before the dessert arrived. Luckily, the twins decided to leave the topic for the rest of the night. I felt relieved. I had just started looking through Ken's laptop when his cell phone rang. It was a text message. "DK Srey 4 Snafu. LYJ. Dear Ken, sorry for the trouble. Love, Janet." I'm not the world's best texter. In fact, I'm pretty bad. But I had no trouble reading this message. It came from Sarah's cell phone, which meant Sarah and Janet were together. I couldn't resist the temptation. "TJ. Thanks a lot, John." Now she knew that I had Ken's cell phone. I spent the next couple of hours going through files and folders on Ken's computer. There were no emails between Janet and Ken, but there were some interesting emails between Ken and some old friends in Lancaster. I was shocked by what I read, and I definitely didn't like it. Janet and I had been together almost our entire lives, and now I learned that I never really knew her. She seemed to have gotten closer to Ken in less than a year than she had with me in almost 20. While I was replacing the cartridge in the printer, I noticed that I was crying. This is not what I usually do. She had hurt me with her deception, and now I felt the salt in the wounds. Perhaps it was because of my tears. I printed out several emails and a dozen photographs. I would have taken more photos, but I ran out of expensive paper. There were no pornographic images, or even anything racy. All of them were suitable for mixed company. Beth poked her nose in the door and asked if she could call her mother. I didn't feel like I could refuse. My mother was with the twins while they talked to Janet and overheard everything. She didn't eavesdrop, but it seemed like the girls weren't trying to hide anything. Mom later told me that they didn't cut Janet any slack and blamed her for the whole problem. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. The emails were extremely interesting. Ken applied and was hired as an engineer for an alternative energy project in Spain. His start date was in 6 weeks. Apparently, he did not warn Gilbert about his departure. I'm sure Sarah knew, but no one else mentioned it. He had all the documents ready for the trip except for my passport. I'm sure he could find a replacement, but he better hurry if he wants to set a start date. I guess he could always go to the police and report that I stole it, but I didn't think he would do that. He hasn't booked his plane tickets yet. One of the letters to a close friend explained a lot. Janet planned to get a divorce after joining Ken in Spain. She realized that I would never allow her to take the girls out of the country, so she was going to declare me an unfit father. The letter didn't go into detail about how she was going to achieve this, but it did indicate that it would be severe enough to revoke my visitation rights for the twins or custody. It was completely despicable. Ken wrote this letter, so it was all rumors. I would have liked to have gotten something original from Janet, but I had to make do with what I had. I printed out several copies of this letter. Mom fell asleep watching Leno, so I sent her to our bedroom. The girls have already gone to bed. I fell asleep on the couch, and there were 4 empty beer bottles on the coffee table. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and bacon. Mom always prepared a good breakfast. The girls were finishing their cereal when I approached the table. I had to endure some good-natured digging before I could start cooking the eggs. The conversation was casual until it was time for the bus. Girls, I'm afraid your mother will try to separate us. She plans to declare me an unfit parent so she can keep you all to herself. I have no problem with shared custody if it keeps you two happy, but I won't give up my right to see you and be with you. I don't want you to have to pick sides, but I want you to know what's going on. Be careful, and I don't listen to any lies. Dad, we are smarter than you think. Don't worry about anything. We love Mom, but we won't let her screw you up or anything. Brittany smiled, and Beth gave me a thumbs up as they walked out the door. Mom filled my cup and sat down with hers. Relax, John. Everyone is on your side. After showering and shaving, I put on some clothes that were a little nicer than what I usually wear. When I left the house, I felt a little strange because I had 3 mobile phones with me. I made a mental note to buy the cell phone charger Ken had given me. I probably won't need it, but I'd rather be prepared for it. I checked into the family services office and waited for the caseworker to call me. I was confused when I finally got the call because I knew the woman who came to my aid, John Terrell. I haven't seen you for over 10 years. What did you do? Jody Mitchell was easy to remember. In high school, she was one of the goth girls. The goths had their own small group and stuck together. They were ostracized by most of the other kids, especially the athletes, including me. She looked normal now, but I'll only ever remember her for her pink hair, black lipstick, and dark eye makeup. The funny thing is that the goths could never determine whether they were into drugs, sexual deviance, or witchcraft. As for Jody, it was probably none of those things, but you always believe the most outrageous things. The sign on her desk read J. Mitchell, so I assumed that she had never been married. 12 years ago, I could understand it, but today she looked, John, what can I do for you? My train was interrupted by her question. I discovered that I stuttered a little. You look great, Jody. She laughed at my awkwardness. You mean compared to how I looked before? Now I felt embarrassed. Probably, but I didn't mean to imply anything. Relax, John. I was halfway through college when I realized that I was smart enough to see the world as I was, without a false facade. I've been what you would call normal for almost a decade now. I'm much more comfortable saying normal than before. Damn it, but that sounds patronizing. I have a hard time keeping my foot away from my mouth. You must excuse me. Forget it. Why are you here? Before we begin, I need to ask you a question. Do you have a file or report on me? Anything at all? Her fingers danced across the keys like a pianist. There's nothing here, John. You married Janet Wilcox, is that right? Yes, and there's nothing under her name either. It sounds like you two are feeding your children rather than beating them. You have children, right? Yes, we have 12-year-old twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Fine. Now can we move on to the problem that brought you here? Jody, this is a little far-fetched, and I know it may seem hard to believe, but my wife is planning to leave me and wants to take the girls with her. It's not hard to believe, John. We see this all the time. Shouldn't she have a reason to do something like that? Usually, when a mother comes to us, she has documents or something else to support the accusation. You just checked and there's nothing there now, right? That's right, John. But how do I know that you're not setting me up because you did something and she hasn't had a chance to report it yet? She may be obtaining medical information or police reports before coming to our office. Just because we don't show anything on our computer doesn't mean you didn't do anything. You say I can't win. No, I'm not saying that. Why do you think she's going to do something like that? I had no intention of showing anyone the email Ken sent, but now I felt I had no choice. I had to ask myself why I made copies if I wasn't going to give them to anyone. I handed one across Jody's desk. Where did you take it? I took it from a computer that I got illegally. I know it can't be used for any legal reason, but it's kind of proof of what's going on. The word conspiracy comes to mind, but I don't know the legal definition of that. I wanted to talk to you or anyone in this office because I didn't know what to do. I don't know how to protect myself and my daughters from something like this, and I can't afford a lawyer. Jody Mitchell relaxed in her chair. I looked at her and didn't blink. She rocked back and forth several times and leaned toward me. Can you come back tomorrow morning? Yes. Fine. See you then. Can I keep this copy of the letter? I nodded yes and turned to walk out the door. It was nice to see you, John. I smiled and she smiled back. I forgot the goth girl and saw a new Jody. I didn't know any lawyers and didn't know anyone who knew lawyers, so I had to pick one from the phone book. I knew that she was planning to divorce me, but under the circumstances, things could change. I didn't want to take any risks. I wasn't sure what our financial picture would look like in the next few days or weeks, so I asked the lawyer to give me a price up front for the entire package and paid it in cash. I advised him to do it the fastest and easiest way he knows. If she wanted a house, she could have it. Because the property depreciated, it was worth less than the mortgage. I also insisted on joint custody of the twins, at a minimum. I would take full custody if he could do it. I would pay child support but not alimony. Billy called me on the way to lunch. He needed housing and I, of course, offered to shelter him. We met at Taco Bell for a gourmet lunch. When I approached, a stupid smile appeared on his face. I know you can't be that happy. What's happened? A friend of mine who works at Community General Hospital told me a little information about Calvin. Sarah went there to visit him. While she was there, Calvin's wife came in with their 2 children. Sarah had no idea what she was playing. Things got so messy that hospital security had to escort Sarah out. I walked past Gilbert to talk to her, and she was no longer there. She was gone. I think she should be home now, but I'm not sure. Why didn't his wife live here with him? I don't know. Why didn't he go home to his wife and kids on the weekends? I don't know that either. Honestly, I don't care. Billy took a week off from work to sort out his affairs. I didn't know where he would sleep since my mother also lived at home. But we decided that we would figure something out. He was going to go to his house to try and pick up some clothes and his personal belongings in case Sarah wasn't there. He decided he didn't want to talk to her anymore. I was on my way to see my insurance agent, but I didn't make it because my cell phone rang again. John, this is Cameron Wilcox. Can you come over for a while so we can try to figure things out? Janet is in complete despair and her mother is not helping. Who will be there? The 3 of us and Janet's sister, Carla. I'm not sure what you're hoping to achieve, but I'll be there in about 20 minutes. It was a dark group. I took a folder of goodies with me and gave up coffee. Who wants to start? John, Janet seems to think you're overreacting. She claims that you were furious and made her say things that weren't true to calm you down. She claims she didn't do anything wrong and you have no right to kick her out. I had the distinct impression that my dear wife was telling a very embellished version of what happened to her parents. I can understand why she didn't want to admit to them that she had cheated on her. But she resented the fact that she shifted the blame onto me. What do you want me to do, Cameron? Prove she's a liar or admit I made a mistake? I'd just like to see a few facts so we can better understand the situation. What did she tell you about her friend? She claims she didn't have a boyfriend. She just had a few drinks with friends Sarah worked with and that you misinterpreted it. Cameron, she's had over 80 phone conversations with this random friend in the last month. How many times has she called you and her mother in the last month? They both looked at Janet. She looked at her feet, not at them. Is this like a random friend she meets for drinks every now and then? No one was talking when I pulled out Ken's cell phone. Carla, can you read text messages? This letter was sent to a random friend of hers right after I kicked her out. Why don't you read it to everyone? Dear Ken, sorry for the trouble. Love, Janet. Carla returned my phone. Does this sound like a casual friend? Janet covered her face with her hands. Cameron shook his head slowly. A couple of weeks ago, Janet and her friend Sarah told everyone they were going shopping at the King of Prussia Mall. The twins begged to go with them, but their mother said no. Here are some photos taken during this trip. I handed Cameron 6 photographs. He looked at them and handed them to Martha and Carla. This is not like the King of Prussia. It's like Nebelgrove. Damn it, Janet. What's going on? Until this moment, Martha had been silent. Janet, in every photo you are holding onto that person's hand for dear life. It's not something you do with friends. It looks like the guy in these photos, Ken, is much more than just a friend, I guess. Are you trying to pull me here? The tears flowed slowly and quietly. This was not what she had hoped for. She didn't expect these photos. Here are a few more of the same. I think 2 of them are from Olive Garden and 1 looks like Red Lobster. I have a few more. Luckily, my loving wife is wearing all of them. I think we've seen enough, John. I'm sorry we had to call you here for this. Cameron seemed upset at how he had been tricked. When I stood up, Janet was leaving the room, sobbing like a child. We never got to discuss the stains on her underwear. I think at that time there was no need for this. Cameron walked me to the door. John, I'm sorry we can't undo what's been done, but I guarantee you it won't be ignored. He shook my hand as I left. When I got home, Mom and Billy had already set up a fold-out bed in the living room. It wasn't really a hallway, just a small extra room where I kept my computer. Billy had a pile of extra clothes in the corner that he had taken from home. Sarah wasn't home when he came in. The most interesting thing that was waiting for me when I returned home was the mail. In fact, he was waiting not for me, but for Janet. A beautiful official envelope from the passport department. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I couldn't help myself. It was, of course, a passport, but more precisely a family passport. The photo was of Janet and 2 girls. I remember the girls telling me that they had their picture taken, but I never imagined it was for that purpose. Of course, my passport was not in the envelope. I immediately called Cameron and asked him to tell Janet that the goods had arrived. If she needed a passport, all she had to do was send Ken home to pick it up. I would only give it to Ken. I was usually at work when the letter arrived. I would never have known she got it. Cameron told me that they had asked Janet to find another place to live. They had no idea where she was going to go. They seemed a little angry with their daughter. He promised to tell her about the passport. The conversation over dinner was interesting and mostly comprised of girls. Today, a woman from family service came to our school. Bethany said with a shy smile, "Would you like to talk a little more about this? Did she talk to you together or separately?" "We are both at the same time. Her name was Jody. She said you went to high school together." "We went to the same high school at the same time, but we weren't together." Britt frowned at me for being smart. "Pay attention, Dad. What did she want to talk to you about?" "You." "All she talked about was you. Beth and I agreed that she liked you." "Did you understand this from a short conversation?" "She talked to us for over an hour. We missed the gym and the geography part. They were both talking at the same time and I was having a hard time keeping up with them." Dinner was interrupted by Carla's phone call. She wanted to talk. I met Sister Janet at McDonald's. We took a corner table with 2 very hot coffees. "John," Janet asked me to try to explain what was going on. She couldn't do it herself. "This may sound stupid, but if I have questions, how will you answer them?" "I don't think I can. All I can do is talk and you listen." I'm sure I'll mess something up anyway because most of it sounded like gibberish when she told it to me. You are setting me up so that you can tell me that you have no answers. Only excuses and justifications. I always knew you were smart, John. Let's get this over with. I have other things to do. First of all, she blames Sarah for everything. Sarah started cheating on Billy and it sounded exciting and romantic. Janet said she had never had an exciting or romantic experience. All she ever had was you. Loving and reliable. When Ken Sanders started in Gilbert, Sarah convinced Janet to join them for a drink and a bite to eat. While they were together, Sarah and Calvin often disappeared for a little lovemaking and left Janet and Ken alone. Eventually, they started messing around too, and soon, it was a full-blown affair. Once it started, she couldn't or wouldn't stop it. Ken impressed her with his stories of what he was doing and what he was going to do. She wanted to go with and share it all. When he asked her to go to Spain, she jumped at it. The big problem was not leaving you but leaving the girls. She knew you would never let her take them abroad. So she was going to figure out a way to make you look bad. Father. Now she knows it was a mistake. After talking with the girls, she realized that they are closer to you than to her. She decided that she would not try to have twins if you agreed to a divorce without any condition. That's all? Almost so? Yes? Fine. Tell her to go and apply. I will not dispute this if everything is as you described. Oh, John. One more thing. Janet would like to get her passport. Do you have it with you? Now, everything started to become clearer. I had no idea how she planned to do this. But I suspected that she had not given up hope of taking the girls with her. They kicked and scratched all the way unless she had something up her sleeve. The family passport played a decisive role in the deal. Carla, my coffee is cold. I'm going to go home and take a hot shower. Do not call me more. John, what the hell is wrong? How did I make you angry? You know damn well what you did. Do you two really think I'm that stupid? Go back to your whore sister and tell her there is no way she can have my daughters. Since you decided to do it, help her. I'll have to ask you to never talk to my girls again. Carla was talking on her cell phone as I left Mickey D's. I can only guess who she called. I arrived at the family services office before it opened. You couldn't stay away from me, could you? Jody walked into the office with a big smile on her face and a Starbucks cup in her hand. She motioned for me to sit down and apologize for not having more coffee. I think you know that I talked to your daughters yesterday? I nodded and smiled. For some reason I was a little tongue-tied, out of my element. I remembered that the same thing happened the last time I talked to her. Because I was with Janet my whole life, I never had the opportunity to develop any social skills with other women. Looks like I've paid for it now. Is something wrong, John? Apart from that, no, I wasn't trying to be smart. I just couldn't formulate the words. I'm so sorry, Jody. I think I'd better leave. I'm not aware of all this morning. I'll call you later. Before you go, I would like you to know that I am getting a restraining order against your wife. I can't stop her from seeing or being with the girls, but I can stop her from taking them out of state or denying you access to them. It will be delivered to her before noon. This brought a big smile to my face, but I left the office anyway. I headed to the nearest Starbucks. This coffee definitely smelled good. Until today, everything was under control. Now I felt depressed and confused. I drove around for a bit and then headed home. Billy told me that Sarah had moved back to her parents' house near Ephrata, so he was only returning to his place until he could sell or rent it out. He spent the morning at the bank, the insurance company, and the law office. He wanted to try to get some money from Gilbert, but they didn't have a company policy against fraternization. His lawyer said it will be an uphill battle. He walked past the hospital and learned that Calvin was being discharged. His wife was filling out paperwork for her discharge when she saw Billy. Before he could leave, she cornered him and carefully explained that she was trying to get Calvin to drop the charges against him. He was very surprised when she thanked him for his help. Apparently, she had been trying to fix the situation with Calvin for several years without success. After Billy left, I just sat on the porch and drank beer. Mom brought me a meatloaf sandwich and sat with me for a while. She didn't say anything, but she drank the beer. She said that Dad would come for dinner and stay the night. When Jody Mitchell pulled up, Mom came into the house. Jody sat next to me but refused the cold beer I offered. We sat there for a few seconds before she spoke. I served Janet's papers about an hour ago. She was a very angry woman. By the way, she was staying with her sister. I finished the long neck that I was holding in my hand. I think it's good, but why do I feel so bad? In such cases, there is nothing good, John, just less bad. I pulled out another beer, paused, and put it back in the refrigerator. Could you come in and explain all this to the girls? I get along well with them, but no matter how carefully I express myself, it will sound like I'm blaming their mother. I'm afraid if I do this, I will somehow push them away. I do not want to do this. How about 7 tonight? I nodded as she stood up and walked to her car. She stopped halfway and looked back. This was a good sign, and I smiled. She smiled back. Jody came over that evening and spent a long time with Beth and Britt. Billy and I were busy searching his house and clearing out anything that belonged to Sarah or reminded him of Sarah. Jody started coming to our house several times a week. Pretty soon, she was spending as much time with my mom as she was with the girls. I noticed that she was ignoring me. This suited me, but I was curious. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, she sat next to me. I felt like I had to talk to her. I didn't have the chance. She spoke first. Danny, do you have any wine? Something like that. My speaking skills still needed work. What does it mean? I don't have anything with a cork. I have wine, but it all has screw caps. She seemed to think it was funny. Bring me something red and bring me a bottle. Well, the bottle looked more like a jug, but she didn't seem to mind. I poured it and we drank. Finally, I forced myself to break the ice. I think the girls get a lot of benefit from your visits. How long will you have to see them? Oh, the twins are fine. They don't need to see me. I came to her to see you. I don't understand. You barely even talk to me when you're here. I thought that was what you wanted. Not really. I was just afraid you had some kind of rule against fraternizing with clients. Her quiet laugh made me feel more comfortable. I'm amazed that you didn't even ask to see my tattoos. What tattoos? It was clear that she was trying to engage me in some frivolous conversation to try to relax me. It was a good plan and I appreciated it. I have 4 of them and I got them when I was in high school. 3 are easy to find, but 1 is harder. Are you going to show them to me, or will I have to look for them? It'll be more fun if you watch, but I'm going to need some more wine if you're going to do this. We both laughed as I filled her glass to the brim. The hunt was much more interesting because we had to be quiet so as not to wake the girls. The 4th one was indeed in a very secluded place, and I admired her for a long time before she pushed me away. She left before the twins got out of bed, but I had a strange feeling that they knew what had happened. I told my lawyer from the phone book to finish the divorce papers and deliver them. Janet will have to accept what I suggest or do it herself. She was still living with Carla when the papers were served. There was no answer and they didn't even call me. Several more weeks passed. Things weren't going well for my father. Mom spent more time there than with me. Fortunately, school was just ending and the girls moved in with her for the summer. By the end of the summer, Dad was transferred to a nursing home. Billy and I helped Mom prepare the family home for sale and Mom moved back in with me. Jody visited the girls at their mother's all summer and spent 3 or 4 evenings a week with me. They went shopping and out to dinner together and I was glad for the attention Brittany and Bethany were giving. At least I didn't envy them anymore. I was pretty sure they knew what was going on between Jody and me. Janet called the girls about once a week, but the conversations were always short and according to her mother seemed tense. Most of the time the twins didn't even tell me she called. Billy's divorce from Sarah was finalized. I had no idea what my status was. He also decided he wanted to start his own surveying business and asked me to come with him. I didn't have enough money to contribute until my mom came to the rescue. When she and her father ran out of money, Medicare picked up his expenses. Instead of watching it all disappear, she thought I should use it for business. I believe she also thought of it as an investment in her future. 3 months later, Billy and I had our own small surveying business. Fortunately, my drawing skills developed into drawing stories. About a week into the new semester, the twins were visited by their mother. They thought they would go to the guidance office to see Jody, and they were both disappointed to see Janet. They tried their best to be polite and respectful to her, but they still couldn't. She told them she loved them both and was sorry things turned out the way they did. She was going to Spain to see the windmills and would send them some postcards. She promised to call them every year on their birthday and send them amazing Christmas gifts. They said she cried when she left. Janet never called me to tell me she was leaving, but the next week her parents showed up at the house. They apologized again for what Janet did, but made no attempt to defend her or justify her actions. Brittany and Bethany were their only grandchildren and they wanted to be able to see them. I had no problem with their request. They said Carla was too ashamed to come to me. She was torn between her sister and her parents. 2 months later, my divorce was final. Jody and I went to Red Lobster to celebrate. It was a rare evening without girls. They didn't seem to mind. In fact, I think they were in some ways happy. We spent the night at a local Holiday Inn. The twins were delighted when I returned home at 10 o'clock the next morning. They didn't say anything, but they smiled from ear to ear all day. A year later, things were going great, but unfortunately Dad passed away. Mom expressed interest in moving to Florida with her sister, but did not want to leave the girls. The twins felt that their grandmother had to leave. They carefully explained to me that Jody could take her place even though she couldn't cook as well as my mother. They also insisted that they were old enough to live in separate rooms. It was an obvious and good plan. The girls received birthday cards from their mother, but there was no phone call. She also sent many cards. All the postcards showed Spanish windmills. I wasn't sure what that meant. She sent them 2 fashionable embroidered dresses for Christmas, but didn't expect young girls entering their teens to experience a growth spurt. None of them seemed disappointed that the dresses were too small. Gilbert Engineering became our largest client. Billy was pleased to learn that Calvin was now teaching electronics at Lebanon County Vocational School, which was a big downgrade from his previous position. He was no longer married. Sarah remarried and moved to California. Ken Sanders didn't last 6 months at his new job. He was now working in the States, but no one seemed to know where. Billy contacted his high school's alumni association to see if he could figure it out. My best friend always thought I got away with Ken too easily. The strange thing was that the girls still received postcards with pictures of windmills. There was never any information on the cards, just general sentiments. Cameron told me that Janet called them several times. She worked at a travel agency in Barcelona. She never mentioned Ken or gave them any information about what happened between them. Jody and I went to Maryland to get married quietly. A year later, she was waiting. Brittany and Bethany were just as excited as we were. They were looking forward to having a little goth girl as a sister. I think it was some kind of private joke between the girls and their new mother. They never let me in on it. I never understood the significance